Number 10. Double kidnapping. In Colombia, an extremely attractive model was arrested after going rogue and getting involved in a double kidnapping case. Not only was this woman a model, she was also a popular TV host named Paulina Carina Diaz. According to the Colombian police, Paulina used her eye-catching looks to lure two men into a trap that ultimately turned out to be a blackmail and kidnapping plot. Back in 2011, she and her partner, a guy nicknamed El Brujo, were finally arrested for their role in kidnapping a pair of businessmen from a club in the city of Cali. Paulina managed to lure the two men into a dark room by being overly provocative, at which point the men were locked up and a ransom was demanded for them to be released. Paulina was only 27 years old when she got involved in this plot, and police have so far identified at least two other people in connection with the crime, who have each been sentenced to 23 years in jail. We're not sure exactly what other crimes Paulina may have been involved in, but it looks like she'll be spending the rest of her youth locked up behind bars. And if you're wondering why such a beautiful model needed to participate in these crimes to earn extra money, despite being a model and TV host, it's because she didn't actually make that much cash. It was apparently more profitable to use her good looks for evil than to just present the news on TV. That's one way to end up famous. Number 9. The Kansas Murderess. Kate Bender was the daughter of John and Elvira Bender, a family ultimately known by the gruesome nickname the Bloody Benders. Today, Kate is the most famous member of the Twisted Bender family for her role in their series of murders, and for the fact that she was regarded as the lure and a stone-cold fox. The story of Kate and her family goes back to 1870, when the Bender family settled in the rural countryside of Labette County, Kansas. Between May of 1871 and December of 1872, the Benders killed somewhere around a dozen travelers who came through their hotel and store before being discovered. It was easy for the family to slaughter travelers passing through either of their businesses, especially since they had Kate Bender, the beautiful daughter who would lure men into the killing grounds with the offer of a meal, a bit of rest, and maybe a little bit of company. But Kate Bender did more than just lure and kill. She also thought of herself as a healer and a psychic. She distributed flyers throughout Kansas advertising her supernatural abilities. Kate became wildly popular in the first year that the Benders operated therein, attracting even more victims. Unfortunately for Kate and her family, they got a little too overzealous with the killing. By 1873, so many people in the area had been reported missing that travelers stopped going through this part of Kansas. The police then got suspicious, and when they went to investigate, the Bender family had disappeared and were never seen again. According to reports from the time, Kate and her family had killed over a dozen people, possibly as many as 24, all for the sheer thrill of it. Number 8. The Barbie Bandits. At 19, Heather Johnston should have been completing her first year in college back in 2007. Instead, she wound up facing a very long prison sentence for stealing from a bank. The recent high school graduate was a rising tennis player, and she had all the looks to make the other girls jealous, and she even won her very own scholarship. But somewhere along the line, being good just wasn't good enough. Heather developed an appetite for easy money and pricey goods. This led her down a disturbing path of self-destruction and bank robbery. For Heather's family, they thought she was just an ordinary 19-year-old girl, but straight out of high school, she took a job as an exotic dancer in secret. She was making upwards of $1,000 in just a single shift. Then she spiraled even deeper. Heather was using drugs. She moved in with another dancer, and together they cooked up plans to rob a bank. The plan involved Heather, her roommate Ashley Miller, Ashley's boyfriend, and an inside man at the bank. Everything was set up for an easy getaway, seeing as the bank teller was actually in on the whole thing. Even with him in on the plan, the Barbie Bandits almost fumbled the attempt beforehand, originally going to the wrong bank. Still, the girls made away with $11,000. The first thing they did was go to the hair salon and get highlights. But thanks to surveillance footage from the bank that captured the two beautiful women clear as day, it took the cops 2 days to track them down and arrest them. Both girls ended up with multiple charges and are currently on probation. Number 7. Patty Hearst. Patty Hearst, born on February 20, 1954, was the heiress of the extremely wealthy William Randolph Hearst newspaper empire. She was also kidnapped in 1974 by radicals with a group called the Symbionese Liberation Army. The United Federated Forces of the Symbionese Liberation Army was a radical left-wing organization, active between 1973 and 1975, and considered itself a vanguard army. It was 1974 when 3 members of the group broke into her apartment, beat up her fiancé, Stephen Weed, and dragged Patty away. The group then took this completely ordinary girl, brainwashed her, kept her locked inside of a closet, and forced her to rob 2 banks. They also extorted $2 million from her father. It's hard to say exactly what went on between Patty being kidnapped and Patty turning into a gun-wielding bank robber. Whatever the group did to her, it most certainly worked. Patty's case is often referred to as a prime example of Stockholm Syndrome, when kidnapping victims become attached to or sympathize with their abductors. After most of the group was killed by police in a shootout in May of 1974, Patty Hearst went on the run with the few remaining members. They crisscrossed the country, ultimately being caught in San Francisco in 1975. In March of '76, Patty was convicted of bank robbery and sentenced to 7 years in prison. But she was released 3 years later after President Jimmy Carter commuted her sentence. Patty was later granted a full pardon by President Bill Clinton in 2001, going on to act in a handful of films before finally retiring. Number 6. Roxanne Panic. Roxanne Panic is a mother of 5 children. She also happens to be a beautiful bank robber who just got sentenced to 3 years and 8 months in prison for robbing banks in several places. According to San Diego Superior Court Judge Kathleen Lewis, Roxanne had been living a remarkably untarnished life before suddenly embarking on a series of robberies. She had a completely clean criminal record, she had no stains on her reputation, and she only managed to get away with about $2,000 from the robberies. During the court proceedings, the judge even told her, "It looks like you snapped. I don't know why, but it appears you snapped." But why did this perfectly ordinary mother snap and go on a bank robbing spree? Unfortunately, we don't actually know. She hasn't given any motive to her bizarre crimes. Seems like she just woke up one day, decided life was boring and that she could use a bit of cash, and walked into a bank and robbed it. Well, a few banks, before getting caught. Sounds a little bit like Good Girls. Has anyone seen that show? Let me know in the comments below. Number 5. The Adorable Kingpin. When Sarah Fure's mugshot went viral, the internet immediately labeled her the Adorable Kingpin. Sarah's mugshot does not look like it belongs anywhere in the criminal underworld. At just 19 years old, the Blinn College student looks like she should be studying hard, maybe working as a barista, and living the ordinary life of a teenager about to be in her 20s. But instead, Sarah was actually a drug kingpin who was arrested by the police back in November after they got a warrant to search her apartment at College Station. She wasn't just the neighborhood drug dealer for the college, she was the drug queenpin of the whole area. The authorities found her with 31 grams of cocaine, 126 grams of weed, a small pile of ecstasy, some methamphetamine, and over 60 doses of an LSD-like substance. She was basically the Quickie Mart of drugs. To make this story even stranger, Sarah happened to be the daughter of a guy named Bill Fure, who works as a United States Drug Enforcement Administration agent. He was DEA, and his daughter was the biggest dealer in the area. Maybe she had some issues with her father and decided to literally do the exact opposite of what he was doing. Or maybe the two were in cahoots. Last we heard, he had actually been sent to Panama just as his daughter's case was blown open. The adorable drug kingpin, despite her shocking good looks, is facing up to 200 years in prison on drug charges. You know what they say, looks aren't everything. Number 4. A sudden crime spree. In North Carolina, 33-year-old Monica Renee Simpson did not take the news well that her estranged husband, 56-year-old Jeffrey Graham, wanted to end things. In fact, she took the news so poorly that she went on a wild crime spree that involved theft, road rage, shooting, and arson. After Jeffrey called it quits, Monica walked into the local business where her husband worked, called Keith's Tire and Auto, pointed a gun at the people working in the office, and just started shooting. Nobody actually got hurt, but it was still pretty terrifying. It was especially scary for Simpson's husband, the one who had just tried to dump her, as he had to flee out the back of the business while bullets were whizzing past his head. Jeffrey got in his car and tried to drive away. Unfortunately for him, an irate Renee commandeered a Jeep Wrangler and began to give chase. While chasing him, she shot her gun at his vehicle like she was playing Grand Theft Auto or something. When she didn't manage to kill him, she drove to his house and lit it on fire. Oh, but not before driving the Jeep straight through the front wall. By the time the police got there, the Jeep and the house were both up in flames. The crime spree was over, and Simpson ran away to her mother's house, where police quickly caught up with her and placed her under arrest. Number 3. Axe-wielding couple. Two young women went on the craziest crime spree you've probably never heard of. It happened in Australia, and the crime spree only lasted for a single night. It was one of those going down in flames moments. The couple, Eleanor Ashford and Sarah Canseri, used an axe, a knife, and a hammer to terrorize gas stations. The two women ran into the stores, one of them waving the axe and the other waving a knife. They then stole money and cigarettes before moving on to their next target. This worked 2.5 times. They held up the first two convenience stores but ended up getting in trouble at the third. Maybe it was because they stopped using the axe and ran into the store carrying hammers. Either way, they got chased out of the store, had to flee the scene on foot, and were quickly traced down by a police dog unit. No real motive has been given for why the young lesbian couple felt it necessary to go on such a random crime spree. When the police searched their vehicle, they discovered all the weapons, a small stack of money, the cigarettes, and some stolen license plates. The girls had obviously been anticipating a much longer-lived spree than just one night. Number 2. The Pink Lady Bandit. The FBI recently offered up a reward of $10,000 for any information that would lead to the arrest of someone who had been dubbed the Pink Lady Bandit. She managed to rob 4 banks in a single week through Delaware, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina. Each robbery had footage of the suspect entering the bank with a pink handbag, sunglasses, a navy baseball hat, and a standard woman-on-the-go outfit of yoga pants and a tank top. On the street, this woman would never stand out. She looked like any other law-abiding citizen, which allowed her to make her getaway easily multiple times, blending in flawlessly with standard patrons. The Pink Lady Bandit went on robbing for 2 full weeks before the FBI finally caught up to her after getting a tip that she was staying at a hotel in Charlotte, North Carolina. So they raided the place. They have since identified the bandit as Circe Baez. She is now trading in her yoga pants and tank tops for an orange jumpsuit. Number 1. The Cartel Queen. Sandra Avila Beltran was once considered the queen of the cartels. She was at the upper echelon of the Mexican drug world for nearly a decade, making her a true femme fatale in every sense. She was one of the only women to access this level of power within the Mexican underworld. At the height of her career, she was known for walking around with suitcases filled with $100 bills. She used to organize fleets of tuna boats packed with cocaine, sending them up the coast to the United States. But like all big drug lords, Sandra was eventually busted. She spent just 7 years in prison on charges of money laundering. But this was no ordinary jail time. She wasn't left in some dingy cell. She was in an ambassador suite, living in jail with 3 maids, all the food she could eat, plenty of alcohol and cigarettes, and all the prestige of one of Mexico's richest, most infamous drug lords. Thanks for watching! Which of these women shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button for more videos like these. See you next time. Bye!